Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown, and welcome to A Heart for Business, a podcast where we talk to business owners who really focus on a caring company. And I'm thrilled and delighted to have my colleague Jimmy Zollo with us today. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi, Denise. Thanks for having me.
You have a company called Joe and Bella, which is an adaptive apparel brand. That's what it is now. It wasn't what it was when it started. And I also want to just talk a little bit about your background, because this isn't your only company that you run. You actually have another company. So how do you juggle both businesses in a way that's effective for you?
Well, it hasn't been easy, and it's been a learning process as to where to put our priorities and our time and our resources. And there's only so much you can get done. So I've slowly been transitioning full time to Joe and Bella and bringing in folks to run things on the Collaborata side. And so Collaborata was a marketing research business and data analytics business, and focus on really large scale and ambitious projects. And it's still up and running and doing well today. Primarily, it started focusing on generational research. And one of our most important annual projects was done collaboratively with AARP and looking at aging and longevity and caregiving, which Joe and Bella ended up becoming a natural extension of. And there's been a lot of interesting overlap, which we've loved.
So when we first connected, it might have been 2 years ago, and you really were an e-commerce store, for lack of a better way to describe it. And then you made this pivot to really be this adaptive apparel brand. Now, I say that in one sentence, so it sounds like, oh, just overnight you were able to make this pivot. But we know that pivots sometimes take energy and time and can be a little stressful. What started you to think, okay, I know this is what we started with, but I think we need to move into a different direction?
Right. Well, so we started, as you said, just as a marketplace for products for caregivers. And we started because my grandmother was living in a memory care community when the pandemic hit. And we obviously couldn't always call her up and ask her what she needed and when she needed it. So we launched Joe and Bella really out of that need. And I think there are a lot of brands that now service that need really well. And frankly, we were going up against Amazon, which was a unique challenge because we would never beat Amazon pricing. And also we baked in that all of our profit at that time was going back in the form of a caregiver appreciation fund. And that all changed one day when I was FaceTiming with my grandmother, and that really meant a caregiver set up her phone so I could talk to my grandmother. And the caregiver was helping my grandmother get dressed and helping her put on a sweater because she was cold. And I'll never forget what happened next is that my grandmother dropped an F-bomb. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever heard her swear. And it was shocking for so many reasons. Number one, she was the most formal woman I have ever or probably ever will meet in my life. She was always very conscious about the word choices that she used, so I couldn't believe it. But she swore out of pain because having to just move her arm back a little bit was excruciating for her. And I'd later find out that she was so intimidated by the pain of having to dress and undress and go to the bathroom that she had stopped to drink water, that she would deprive herself from water. And the staff there almost had to force her and convince her and argue and do everything they could, plead with her to drink water because she just didn't want to go to the bathroom and didn't want to feel that pain of having to get out of the wheelchair. And I remember hanging up the phone just so deeply frustrated, and not at the caregiver, because that care partner did such an incredibly patient and gentle job and did everything that they possibly could to make that process easy. But my grandmother's body just didn't move that way anymore. And as we age, our bodies change, and the way our clothes are designed hasn't necessarily evolved with that change, with that evolution. So I did what any millennial grandson would do. I went to Google and I found a couple options for adaptive apparel. So clothes that are altered to make dressing safer and less painful. I found a couple options, sent them to my grandmother, and when she got them, she refused to try anything on. So I called her up and I said, hey, what's going on? Why won't you wear anything? And her only response was too ugly, which again, very true to her, was that she, even with progressed dementia, would never wear anything that was less than who she had always been. That piece of her identity did not go anywhere. And that was really the start of our pivot, where we said, look, there's a way to do both, to make clothes that make dressing safer and faster and less painful and more dignified, but also they're beautiful. And it's the type of clothes that anyone would wear at any stage of their life because of how comfortable they are and how great they look and how much they match our personal identity. So that's how the pivot started, but it took a really long time to get to where we are now. And we actually have a very long way still to go.
It's interesting. I had talked to your colleague, Ben, this past fall, I guess it was, and he was telling me about your pivot. And I shared the experience with my mom. Now, I told you before the podcast, my mom just died last week, but she had a really difficult last year in terms of trying to keep on weight. So she was losing weight. Her clothes didn't fit right, but she still wanted to be as active socially as possible. So she liked to play bridge. She liked to go to her book club meetings, which took place at a country club. It was important to her that she felt like she looked good. And it was a challenge to find the clothes that she liked because she liked a young style. She didn't like a style that you would think an 87-year-old woman should wear.
Exactly.
She wanted to reflect her taste and she wanted to feel like she looked good. And it was very interesting to hear her talk about how frustrating it was that she couldn't find clothes that fit, that looked good for her.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to solve. And there are two points there. Is that the first is about the age that you dress for. So before Collaborata, with our work with ARP, we ran a study every year and had a specific measure that we called age aspiration, where we would ask thousands of Americans, if you could be any age, what would you be? And the idea behind that was simply to tell marketers that when you make products, when you communicate, to communicate to somebody's aspirational age, not their actual age. And not necessarily saying, hey, if you're marketing to somebody who's 80, have a commercial that's showing a bunch of 20-year-olds. It's the ethos of that age. It's the emotions behind it, and definitely the style too. And so what your what your mom felt was what so many people felt, and really consistent with the data that we always saw. 80-year-olds, what we would see, always wanted to be 42 would be their aspirational age. And on the other spectrum, 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds would always say 21, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the fit is a really interesting challenge that we've been working through. And back to that point about losing weight, or in some cases gaining weight as we age, is a challenge, as well as how our body parts and our skin fall changes. So we've got to be really conscious about where we put extra fabric. How do we make pants and shirts that are adjustable to changing sizes? And how do we ensure that we're not creating pressure points when we have those adaptive features built in? Because it's been tricky, but we're getting there.
You know what else is interesting? So the last 10 days that my mom was alive, she was in a hospital bed, still at home. And my sister and I were very aware of what she looked like, trying to figure out what clothes do we put on her. And because she was in this hospital bed, we were also doing hands-on care in a different way. And at one point, we did look at hospital gowns to buy for her because they had an opening in the back. And honestly, what she said to us, why bother? I'm not going to be here. Doesn't, because she was at that point, she was very accepting of her death. But we really wanted her to look good because people were coming to visit with her to say their final goodbye. And it was a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out, what does she wear at end of life? Because she still wanted to look good and we still wanted her to look good.
Right. And it's those final moments with your loved one is how you'll always remember them. And I'll give you a quick story. So one of our advisors, her name's Sevi Petras. She's the CEO of Priority Life Care, which is a network of care communities throughout the country, and she runs some hospice as well. And when we were looking to partner with Sevi, we sent her some sample products, and she had her hospice team use them. And that was the exact feedback that they came back to us with, which was, look, normally in hospice, our patients or our residents are wearing hospital gowns. And that feeling of being institutionalized deeply impacts both the individual who's wearing them and the family in this sort of subconscious emotional way, versus when the family's coming in and their loved one is wearing clothes that look like their loved one, both the person that's wearing them and their loved ones feel different about the experience. And look, I even think when we age a little bit younger, as people are starting their journeys, whether that is with dementia or other forms of cognitive decline, I think there's an opportunity to have this sort of deep emotional tie that will be impactful. And I think the pandemic has showed us that our circumstances can deeply impact our mental acuity and how rapidly our different abilities progress and change. And I think clothing is part of that in ways that we didn't really understand before.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It's one of the lessons that my mom really has left with me is we want to look good up until the very last moment. So what's interesting to me is that you obviously are someone who cares deeply. And you're running a business that needs to make money so that you can continue to care deeply. So when you make a pivot, you also have to look at the cash flow, ensuring that you're pivoting in a way that still keeps money coming in. What did you learn about sustaining revenue during a pivot?
Yeah, so we ran that pivot very gradually. So over the course of several weeks, we started pulling back on a lot of the e-commerce caregiver products that we were carrying, and slowly started integrating adaptive apparel. And we first started out just almost as an adaptive apparel marketplace, and the idea was, let's make sure this works, and that's tested in a very small way. And as we were having success with those tests, from an SEO perspective, an SEM perspective, we start changing the percentage of the SKUs that were apparel versus non-apparel items, to the point that we eventually, over the course of several months, got 100% to apparel. So it was never a sort of announced thing to our customers that, hey, we are now an apparel brand. It would just slowly happen over time. And behind the scenes, then we started working with a woman. Her name's Kara Sumpton, and Kara is a phenomenal apparel designer. So she was early on at Lululemon and designed the launch line for Fizz, which has grown to be just an amazing brand that makes really fashionable hospital scrubs. And I'll never forget the first time we talked to Kara. She's incredibly in demand and a really hard person to get to take on a project because of how successful she's been in the past. But it was the day after her grandmother's 95th birthday, and she bought her grandmother something that her grandmother couldn't wear. And if it were not for that moment, I don't know if Kara would have taken on our project and done so with the level of care and thought and effort that she's put forth. And she's gone on to say that what she's doing with Joe and Bella is the most important work of her life, which she really believes. And this is a woman who designed some incredibly commercial successful products for Lululemon and others. So behind the scenes, we've now been developing several products. We've got our first that's now on the market. We have several others that are in the works too, that cross the gamut of significant adaptive features to others that we would almost categorize as easy dress. And the goal is to really destigmatize what it means to wear adaptive apparel, because I do think that is part of the challenge that we'll run up to, is that folks don't want to wear something that feels different. So it's our goal to eliminate that stigma.
Yeah, I think that's so true, especially because when you are aging and you have mobility issues, you already have something that makes you look different.
Right.
Your cane, your walker, so you want your clothes to help you fit in. So it's interesting to me too that you almost have this like petri dish where you are testing and figuring out and problem solving. So you're running research and development. I'm just curious, how do you figure out, and I don't want you to necessarily give us any trade secrets, but I'm just curious, how do you figure out what that budget is for that petri dish, so to speak?
Yeah, I think relative to other startup brands and early stage companies, it's probably been significantly more than what other folks would do. And that would be my business bias, is that I come from a research background. My co-founder was in a marketing research space for 30 plus years. So that's our bias, and that's what we know and what we feel comfortable with. But we've run a range of studies from starting out just internally. Our sales data was research to us. So we are seeing what products we're selling, not just from a design perspective, but from a utility perspective, a size, a SKU, a color, a fit, zippers versus magnets versus Velcro. And then we would be individually calling up a lot of those customers to really understand what they liked and what they didn't like. And then we ran studies going on into memory care community partners around Chicago. And we actually had care staffs wear the products themselves, as opposed to the residents in some cases. So we get the care staff's opinion on it, which was incredibly important feedback. Then from there, what we're doing next is we actually have a study we're starting on Thursday. So we have several styles in development, and we're setting out a quantitative survey to our customer base to get their feedback on each style. That's going to help us develop it. And then when our prototypes for those styles come on in, we then immediately get those into the hands of caregivers within memory care communities so we can do some user testing. And then the final big study that we've got on the works is we're going to be doing a study within several different communities across assisted living and memory care, as well as hopefully independent living as well, if we can find the right partners that look at the time it takes to dress, undress, and go to the bathroom for folks in non-adaptive apparel versus in Joe and Bella adaptive apparel. And we'll be able to come back and say, hey, look, this is how much time we will save your residents over the course of the year. This is how much time we'll save your staff over the course of the year. This is how for folks who are wearing incontinence products, this is how much less they'll be sitting in a soiled incontinence brief for over the course of the year. This is how they feel. This is what are they happier? Are they more confident? Are they in less pain? So we're really excited. We're hopefully kicking that off in late September when some more of our prototypes get on over here. But it's going to be a really significant undertaking, but we think it's going to be really meaningful. And we're look, I would say for a normal apparel company, this would be overdone, but for the audience that we're serving, I don't think there can be enough research done. And the last study that we have been able to unsurface about how long does it take to get dressed in a memory care community was done in 1999. So there's no modern research or data on any of this that we've seen out there.
And there's a very different data collection experience versus watching versus doing.
Yeah.
And it's really the doing that tells you what's working. You had mentioned competition when we first started talking. So you were talking about Amazon as being a competitor to you when you first launched as an e-commerce site. So I'm just curious, how do you keep a good perspective on competition? How do you kind of keep a lay of the land feel for what's going out there? And then how do you keep a good perspective about anyone who's competing with you?
Yeah, I would say I could talk about this for a few hours, because there are a lot of other brands that make adaptive apparel. Now most of them, about 90% of them, if not more, make adaptive apparel for younger demographics, which to us has always been really interesting. Even Kim Kardashian recently launched an adaptive apparel line for women's in their 20s and 30s. Look, I think we can learn a lot from our competitors. And I think we could probably teach a lot to our competitors. And For this specific space at this specific time, um, I think competitors being successful is good for Joe and Bella, because the awareness for what adaptive apparel is still incredibly low. I would venture to say if I were to walk into 10 memory care communities today, 9 out of 10 executive directors would tell me they don't know what adaptive apparel is and none of their residents have any. So I'm okay with our competition being really successful, and we want them to be because we think that's good for us, because that means there's more awareness, more people searching for our products that they'll eventually find. Um, One of the other brands that is a significant player in the adaptive apparel space for older adults is a partner of ours, and that we want to grow with in fun and interesting ways. And we think we make products that are serving a slightly different market than the products that they're making. Um, but yeah, it's tricky. And I also say a lot of what we're making is products that will have provisional patents or will have fully executed patents when they come to the market. But in apparel, patents are flimsy at best, and there's always a way for big brands to knock off, or brands in other countries to knock off. So we're acutely aware of that. So it's more about making a really great brand that resonates with people, and at the core of that great brand is products that are what people want to wear, and they're comfortable and they're fashionable and they speak to who their personal identity is.
Yeah, I try to really keep a healthy perspective about competition. And I also think the same thing. If others are successful, it just means that success is available for all of us and we learn from each other. And I will also say that you touched on something that I think is difficult for other organizations maybe to do, and that is you really establish a relationship with your customers. So you're not just looking at the transaction, you're looking at the relationship.
That's exactly right. And this goes back to the story of who Joe and Bella are, and why it's so important for us to have that personal relationship. So indulge me. I'll give a really quick 60-second story. Is we moved my grandparents into a memory care community Christmas Eve of 2012, and it was obviously you don't plan to move in on Christmas Eve. You do so because it's a last minute decision. And it was because the day before my grandmother fell again, and it was time. Despite having 24-hour in-home care, we had done everything that we thought we could do to prolong that move and prolong that decision. But it was time, and we just couldn't wait anymore. And when you move into assisted living or have a loved one you're moving in, you go through every sort of emotion, and you know this person. You go through every sort of emotional feeling that you can of, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right place? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to be around people that they want to be around? Or is the staff going to treat them all right? Are they going to like the food? Every sort of doubt crosses your mind. And so we're going through that. And we're at the care community. It's probably 8 o'clock at night. It's a skeleton crew because it's Christmas Eve, and we're getting a tour after we had finally finished unpacking. And we're all depressed. Our heads are down. We're probably not engaging much. And 2 residents of the communities tag in line with us, and they slowly start taking over the tour in almost like an Abbott Costello style like takeover, where they had a whole routine. They were hysterical. And by the end of it, we were laughing and left with just the best feeling of, thank God we made this move when we did, and thank God for those 2 people. And that was Joe and Bella. And we later found out they were widowed Holocaust survivors who had met later in life. Bella had survived Dachau concentration camp as a kid, and she was the only surviving member of her family. And they both had the most incredibly positive way to communicate about their life. And that moment, and they ended up being adopted grandparents to us. They came to Mother's Day and Father's Day and Thanksgiving, and they ate every single meal from there on out with my grandparents. And so we named that Joe and Bella after Joe and Bella because of that feeling of, we recognize people are going to come to our site when something's happened to either them or a loved one, that, hey, maybe they've just found out that their dad has Parkinson's and it's going to progress, or their loved one has dementia, or it's time to move into a care community, and the care community suggested they get adaptive apparel. So they're coming to us in a time of need. So it's our job to make sure we give back that feeling, and make sure that it is a relationship and not transactional. So what we did to start was, we brought in a woman to run our customer care team. Her name's Taylor, who worked in a care community as a nurse for several years. And Taylor's fantastic and really understands what that experience, what that move in, what those turning or inflection points feel like. And we do everything we can to answer calls and never say no to sticking on the line longer than I think a normal company would like to, and taking that time to really make sure that folks feel like we're there for them, because it's everything. And I know you've talked about this so much, and written about this, but I think especially in this space, having that relationship means everything.
It's interesting. It occurred to me that you only got to where you are with your adaptive apparel because you had the courage to start with what you started with. If you hadn't started, you would have never gotten to where you are. And if you hadn't committed to really listening to what customers wanted and what they needed, you wouldn't have effectively found this really amazing solution and solutions. It's just important to remember that sometimes we think, oh no, it didn't work, I have to pivot. But the pivot is the beauty of the business.
100%. So thank you. And for anyone that's listening who maybe is an entrepreneur already or whatever, think about them. What I would say is recognize that the course of starting a business, you're going to make so many mistakes, and that the pivots are not a reflection of those mistakes. It's a reflection of you listening and reacting and improving. And to us, that the pivot's the fun part. It's, oh, we just learned something, or the customer just gave us a really incredible insight. It's that aha moment, which, as an entrepreneur, you live for.
Right, because it's the nugget of gold, and you think, I can't believe someone gave it to me. I can't believe it. It's just amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's my last question for you. How would you describe a caring company?
So that's such a great question. So I would say a caring company, it's got to flow through every aspect of the business. And it starts with how you treat your own people, because you can't not treat your own team incredibly well and expect them to then not go treat your customers that well. So for us, we believe in hiring incredibly great people, regardless of their backgrounds, to be in our business role. So we have our marketing person is a former teacher, our head of customer care is a former nurse. We like hiring from non-traditional backgrounds. We hire based upon character. And then I think it also then has to flow through. So how are you making your products, or how are you sourcing your products? Are you doing it ethically? Are you working with ethical brands? And then also how do you give back too? So we're working now, we give a portion of every dollar we make back. We're working on a partnership that we can't yet announce with a phenomenal not-for-profit organization that we're really excited about. So it's got to flow through everything. And if any aspect of your business doesn't care, then there's a disconnect, and nothing works. So it's each touch point needs to matter.
I think it's Ben, who's the former teacher, who's your head of your marketing, who I connected with. Yeah, I think it was this past fall. And it was fascinating to hear his story too. And I think it's just amazing what you guys are accomplishing. It's just wonderful. Okay, so Jimmy, thank you so much for your time today. So Joe and Bella, give us the website address for anyone who'd like to learn more.
Yes, so it's joeandandbella.com, B as in boy, You can find us on all the socials at Shop Joe and Bella across all of them, I believe, including TikTok, which we're going to start using soon and try to figure that channel out. So definitely check us out across social at joeandbella.com. Sign up for our newsletter, and you'll see a bunch of new products that are coming out soon in the next several months, which we're excited about.
TikTok is going to love you. Oh my gosh.
I
Wow.
hope so. It looks like it's
Oh,
going to be fun,
wow.
and the number
Wow.
one growing demo on TikTok right now are folks over the age of 45. So it's we're excited to try and figure that channel out.
Okay, keep us posted.
Well,
Thank you again. Yeah, thank you again so much, Jimmy. This was fabulous.
thank you so much. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks everybody so much for watching and listening. I'm Denise Brown. Be sure to stop by caregiversacademy.com to listen to our other podcasts and check into all our special initiatives that are going on. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.